What if everything people thought they knew about Donnie McClurkin's confession was not the full truth? What if the headlines from the early 2000s only showed one side of the story and left the rest hidden? You won't believe how much was left unsaid. Donnie McClurkin, one of gospel music's most powerful voices, shocked the world when he confessed about his struggles with sexuality, his battles with abuse, and the deep wounds of his past. The media at that time turned his words into a storm of controversy. They painted him as a man trapped in contradictions, a gospel minister speaking openly about desires that many considered forbidden. But here's the shocking part. Those quick headlines never showed the real story. They made him either a hero for some or a hypocrite for others. But they never told people how much pain was behind those words. Let me tell you, this is how everything started. Long before the fame, before the Grammy Awards and sold-out concerts, Donnie's life was shaped by wounds that went back to his childhood. As a boy, he faced unspeakable trauma when he was sexually abused. That experience broke his trust and confused his understanding of love, intimacy, and self-worth. The scars of that dark time stayed with him for years, and they became the foundation of the battles he later confessed to the world. This is where it gets interesting. His confession was never meant to be a scandal. It was his way of crying for help, his way of trying to make peace with the trauma that lived inside him. The craziest part was that the media ignored this deeper truth. They didn't show the context of his story. Instead, they focused only on the controversial parts, turning his vulnerability into gossip. What makes this story different? It was not about fame or attention. Donnie wasn't trying to shock people. He was a man carrying unbearable pain. And when he spoke about it, he wanted healing, not headlines. But destiny took an unexpected turn when his honesty was turned against him. Church leaders began to distance themselves, worried about their reputations. Some whispered behind his back, while others reduced his testimony to nothing more than scandal. And yet, even in that storm, Donnie pressed forward. His confession was misunderstood, but inside he knew it was the only path to freedom. He carried the burden of being both a gospel icon and a broken man who still searched for answers in his faith. Behind closed doors, he wrestled with voices that questioned his faith and his identity. Every night, he felt the weight of loneliness. But he also believed that speaking his truth, no matter the cost, was the only way he could ever be free. Donnie's confession spread quickly, and soon every newspaper, magazine, and gossip blog carried his name. You won't believe how far people went to twist his story. To the public, he became a symbol of contradiction. On one hand, a gospel star who inspired millions, and on the other hand, a man who openly admitted battles many refused to even whisper about. But here's the shocking part. While the world was busy judging him, very few asked what really pushed him to speak out. The headlines were loud, but the silence behind them was even louder. Donnie himself later said the reports were incomplete, that people only knew half of what really happened. He had spoken from a place of pain, but the world only saw controversy. Let me tell you, this is how his struggle shaped his music. Every lyric, every song that touched hearts carried pieces of his private battles. When people sang "We Fall Down" or "Stand," they thought they were simply praising, but for Donnie, those words were his lifeline, his own way of surviving. This is where it gets interesting. Fans were celebrating his music, but in reality, Donnie was pouring his wounds into those songs. His voice sounded powerful on stage, but inside he was still fighting. The craziest part was how his honesty cost him so much. Some church leaders began avoiding him, saying his openness was dangerous. Behind closed doors, there were whispers that he should tone down his words, that a gospel star should not reveal such things. Destiny took an unexpected turn when he resisted. He refused to hide his scars just to please others. What makes this story different? Donnie believed that by keeping silent, he would betray the broken people who needed to know healing was possible. His confessions were not for fame. They were for those who suffered in silence, just like he once did. But here's the shocking part again. This stand came with a price. He felt isolated, misunderstood, and often alone. Fame surrounded him with lights and crowds, but at the end of the night, he would return to solitude, asking God questions he didn't always have answers to. He admitted in later interviews that even with friends around him, he sometimes felt completely unseen. His testimony was never about shocking the world. It was about unburdening a soul that carried too much for too long. As the years passed, Donnie's story continued to unfold in ways that few could have imagined. You won't believe how the very thing that once brought him shame slowly became the tool of his strength. His confession, which had once been mocked, began to shape his journey of transformation. Let me tell you, this is how his pain turned into purpose. Donnie described his healing like peeling back layers of his own heart, one by one, confronting lies he had believed for years. The journey was slow, filled with lonely nights and tough questions. But with each step, he moved closer to freedom. This is where it gets interesting. His music became both his shield and his sword. Songs like Great Is Your Mercy and I Call You Faithful were not just worship songs for the world. They were confessions wrapped in melody. He was reminding himself of God's love even as he fought inner battles. The craziest part was that people everywhere were singing along, not knowing that those words were the same affirmations Donnie used to rebuild his spirit. His concerts were more than performances. They were moments of survival, and every note carried pieces of his hidden testimony. But here's the shocking part. While his music was healing thousands, whispers behind the scenes never stopped. Some insiders claimed that Donnie's openness made powerful leaders uncomfortable. Rumors spread that he was losing invitations, that certain doors were quietly closing because people thought he was too honest. Destiny took an unexpected turn when Donnie chose not to change himself to fit into those expectations. He continued to preach, to sing, and to testify even when the cost was heavy. What makes this story different? Most people in his position would have stayed quiet, protecting their image and their opportunities. But Donnie believed that silence would kill him faster than criticism. He chose vulnerability over reputation. And though it hurt, he discovered a strength he never thought he had. He began to see that his scars were not just his own. They were lessons, bridges, and signs of hope for people who thought they could never heal. As Donnie's journey moved forward, something powerful began to happen. You won't believe how the same story that once brought him ridicule started to inspire thousands. Fans from across the world began sharing their testimonies, saying his honesty gave them courage to face their own hidden struggles. Let me tell you, this is how his private pain turned into a public ministry of healing. Social media filled with messages like, "Donnie saved my life," or "Hearing his story helped me believe I wasn't alone." Even some celebrities admitted they could never have spoken so boldly, but they admired the strength he showed by refusing to hide. But here's the shocking part. Not everyone was pleased. Behind the curtain, there were still church leaders and insiders who whispered that Donnie had said too much. Some even warned that his transparency was dangerous for the church. Yet, this is where it gets interesting. Donnie never backed down. He believed God had allowed his pain for a reason, and to stay silent would mean denying the very people he was called to reach. The craziest part was that while some doors closed, new ones opened, and he began to touch lives